of the book Resistance: How Women Saved Democracy from Donald Trump. Joining us as well, Stuart Stevens, senior advisor for the Lincoln Project, founding partner of Resolute Square, and author of the book The Conspiracy to End America: 5 Ways My Old Party is Driving Our Democracy to Autocracy. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for being with us. Stuart, let me just talk to you at first. And I don't know, maybe we have to make distinctions between the Kari Lakes and the Steve Bannons on one side and people like Don Bacon, who I spoke to in the last hour. But Steve Bannon's call for not partisanship, but hyper-partisanship. It makes me worry about what the next 2 years are going to look like in Congress.
Yeah, I mean, I think the lesson that we have is that it doesn't matter what the Bacons of the world think. Somebody that might be seen in another era as someone's open to bipartisan solutions, because they're not in control at all. And it's just extraordinary how this sort of weird collection of oddballs and freaks are driving the agenda for America. I mean, Steve Bannon, Kari Lake, these are people who will not say who won the 2020 election. And I think the Democrats should be much more out front on this. They should be saying, every nominee that comes before us, we're going to ask 2 questions. Do you believe that Joe Biden won a free and fair election in 20? And if you equivocate or say, I don't know, or no, that doesn't matter what you say the rest of the time. You are disqualified to serve in government. And I should say, I should ask, do you believe that those who are convicted of attacking policemen on January 6th should be pardoned? And they say no, they equivocate, that's it. So they need to set the standards here, because that's what's shifting. The norms are shifting. When Trump was elected in 20, there was huge outcry. Now it's 20, or it's the same sort of tiredness. When he was elected in 16, I mean, and then the same sort of acceptance of it, almost an exhaustion. And I think that's really important that not be the norm. Which is something you do on the show, by the way. You hold it up. You're holding up the norm.
Right. And by the way, we don't, like, for instance, I'd like to talk to anybody who wants to come on this show, any Republican who wants to come on the show. But we do have some standards. And those standards are, if you can't accept the results of the 2020 election, we can't really go forward with that discussion. But, Jen, this becomes complicated because there are 34 members of the Republican conference who, for whatever reason, don't want to participate in a Congress that operates. You've got the Kari Lakes, you've got the Steve Bannons, you've got Elon Musk. I don't know where he falls into this whole thing. And yet they've got this tiny majority. They actually have to. Mike Johnson needs to be able to have his whole conference and participation from the Democrats in order to move forward. Otherwise, we're just in for dysfunction for the next couple of years, and that may sort the problem out for Republicans.
I think it will. You mentioned Steve Bannon, who is effectively acting as the president of the United States. He blew up a bipartisan budget deal. When they got through it all, Republicans had not advanced any. And in fact, Democrats got credit for blowing up this idea to suspend the debt ceiling. There is a fundamental problem with Republicans in the majority, and that is they don't want to govern. They don't know how to govern, and they don't want to. What they want to do is blow up the place. And that's fine if you're running for office, if you're in the minority, you can make all the speeches you want, you can say all the crazy stuff you want. But when you're in majority, you've got to do stuff. And their ability to do stuff, I think, is going to be severely limited by this utter dysfunction. Democrats have to do a few things. First, Stu is absolutely right. In the Senate confirmation hearings, they must hold these people accountable for their crazy stuff. Secondly, they should never pull the bacon out of the fire for Republicans. If Mike Johnson can't get a majority, he can't get a majority. There's no reason in the world why Democrats should be voting for him. And third, Democrats really do need to put forward what they would be doing instead of this dysfunction. They're going to be up for re-election, all of them, in 2026. What would the alternative be? It would be a sane, bipartisan, Democratic agenda, continuing the Biden tradition, continuing with things like bipartisan infrastructure, not making a mess out of a functional, popular Affordable Care Act. So Democrats need to do, I think, all those things. But most of all, they just need to point out to the American people how bad SHIT the Republicans really are.
Stuart, let's talk about, both of you have mentioned the Senate hearings. You're all very, very hopeful there'll be hearings. I'm not fully sold on the idea that there will, because Donald Trump would prefer if there weren't hearings. There's that, and then there's the speaker vote, which 2 weeks ago I wouldn't have thought was a thing. And yet we're going to see now that it is also going to be a thing. Mike Johnson, and there are lots of reasons to not like Mike Johnson, and he is a Christian nationalist. That said, he did understand that you need Democratic support to do what he needs to do. He is on the side of compromising to get things done. Do you share Jen's view that Democrats should not be involved in electing Mike Johnson as Speaker? Because he may not become Speaker if a Democrat or two doesn't vote for him.
No, I don't think Democrats should help elect Mike Johnson to be Speaker. He's one of these accidental figures in American politics that pop up every time, from time and again. Look, the problem, and Jen is right, that it is this refusal to accept that you are a governing party, and that's really why you got elected. And at the root of this is sort of this lack of any conservative, consistent philosophy. What does it mean to be an American conservative today? Now, we used to be able to answer that and say there were certain core principles. We might disagree on this bill or that issue, but there'll be these principles, that deficit counts, strong on Soviet Union or Russia, character counts. And all of those now have gone out the window. So, Donald Trump has this mind that's sort of like a pinball machine on tilt, and you have Elon Musk, this strange character. The Wall Street Journal reports has extensive drug use, driving this agenda. There's no philosophy behind it. There's no coherent sense of what government's role should be in our lives. And that ultimately is a hollowness now of the Republican Party.
I think this is a really interesting point, because I look back to 1994, Jen, and the contract with America, which, by the way, was a mandate, right? You might not have liked it, might not have been on that side, you might not have voted for them, but they got a mandate. There were a lot of them. They had a mission. They pulled off a lot of that mission. That's not what this feels like. That's not what this feels like. This doesn't feel like, hey, we campaigned to become the governing party in Congress. We won as the governing party of Congress. But instead of doing this list of things that Stewart's talking about, we're just kind of going to be chaotic about it. And we're going to be chaotic in a way that doesn't even indicate who's in charge. Is it Mike Johnson? Is it Steve Bannon? Is it Donald Trump? Or is it Donald Trump's boss, Elon Musk?
Right. This is the cult of power and the cult of personality that Donald Trump fosters. What are they for? They're for whatever Donald Trump and Elon Musk tell them to be for. So it is chaotic. It is contradictory. And remember, they won on the dissatisfaction of the American people, whether right or wrongly, with the state of government, with the state of the economy. And if they don't do anything about that, if they make things worse, or if they just continue this, they're going to get thrown out too. The American people are very anti-incumbent. Western democracies these days have a very tough time staying in power because of this underlying dissatisfaction with democratic government, with inflation, with the complications that come with democracy. So if they are in power for 2 years, what are they going to do to actually keep themselves in power? They think power for power's sake works. Unfortunately for them, we still do have elections. And the American people, and if the Democrats get their act together, will say, what have you done for me lately? And if the answer is nothing, or you made my life more chaotic, or you gave tax cuts to a bunch of billionaires, or you made my health care more expensive, they're going to get bounced out, and they should.
Yeah, you point out a key factor here, and that is that rather than being a landslide, this has been a copy of what has happened in almost every Western democracy in which a government that was in place during the end of COVID and has seen inflation got kicked out. That's how elections work. What do you make, Stewart, though, of the Elon Musk role here? It's been awfully confusing. He seemed to get up one morning and tweet that there should be no budget deal and no continuing resolution, and then suddenly Donald Trump was on that side of things, and then suddenly there was no resolution and we were headed for a government shutdown. Now, interestingly enough, a few people bucked that trend, but tell me what you make of who Elon Musk is and how long this little partnership's going to go on for.
There's this oddest thing that's happened in American politics, and that's the influence of these white South Africans who came to America. Peter Thiel, you have Elon Musk. They're just these odd people who have succeeded in America in a way they never could have succeeded under any other system. And yet they seem dead set on changing that system. And, you know, at the hollowness of this is this sort of, at the core of this is kind of a craziness. Even no individual in the history of America has ever profited from government